Hey, Rebecca.
The live stream's delayed.
Yeah.
I mean, it always will be. I mean, you're seeing this live and then it's going through all their encoders and back out publishing. And
Fascinating.
if you ever do much like the app,
Are we expecting everybody, Marissa?
20 seconds ahead of.
I've not heard that anyone is not coming, so I do expect, I think we're just missing Ellen at this point.
Bird reached out to Joe about, remember that he was gonna do the interview with Noam Chomsky in Arizona. So you wanna do it over Zoom, so I want your. Everyone on the public.
Okay, I have 6 o'clock, so I will call the meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is approval or revision of the agenda for this evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Sherry. Any discussion of the agenda?
Marissa, I have a couple of things on the consent agenda we just have questions on. So 6.04, 0.09, and 0.10.
6.04, 09, and 10.
Yes,
Okay, so you'd like to remove those from consent?
please.
Okay, so those would then become 7.1, 2, and 3. Any other discussion for the agenda? All right, is there a motion to approve the amended agenda? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Sherry. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please state aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay.
I saw Ellen a flash on the screen and then disappeared.
Hi, Maddie.
There she is.
Okay, next on the agenda is recognitions. So we do have a video. Unfortunately, we're not able to do our usual recognition ceremony this evening, but we do have a video that was put together by Sarah to highlight some of our volunteers for this year. Thank you very much for putting that together, Sarah. We appreciate that. Do want to say a special note of thanks to Maddie for serving as our student member of the board this year. What a senior year you've had, huh?
It's been really great to be a part of this.
Well, we certainly do appreciate it. We value your time and we thank you very much for serving on the board this year. Now, where are you headed again next year for school?
Quinnipiac University in
Yay.
Connecticut.
And what will you be studying?
Political
You know yet?
science as of right now. Don't know. That'll be, but that's what I'm in right now.
Say again, Maddie, what is it?
Political science.
Oh, good, good, good.
Very nice. And Mr. Christofoli, you have definitely made this board a much better board, and your service to this district has been outstanding. I really value you as a person, and I thank you very much for serving on our Board of Education.
Well, thanks, Mims. Pleasure serving with you as well. I'm going to say a couple things. I'll be brief, as I always try to be. I have had the good fortune of seeing this district from a lot of different angles. A student teacher. I taught 7th grade social studies for 5 years, for another 5 at the high school, grades 9, 10, 11, 12, as a parent, as a board member, as president for one of those years of the board. And it is in such good hands. Next year, I've got a kindergartner, and I've got an 8th grader, and I've got a high schooler. So how's that for a lot of driving between the buildings? But it's easy to depart the board and this particular capacity, knowing what good hands it's in. The administrators, staff, faculty, board members, your work is excellent. Your dedication unfailing. Your labor is constant and fruitful. And there's no greater cause than education. It's nice to see it in such good hands. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, next on the agenda is public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone for public comment this evening? You're muted. I couldn't hear you if you, do we have anyone for public comment? You're still muted. There we go.
I am checking the chat.
We have a message from Mary Petrulis. Over 20 FMTA members collaborated in its composition. We, the members of the Fayetteville-Manlius Teachers Association, are heartbroken and outraged over the tragic killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. Our hearts are heavy as we are reminded once again of the persistence of racism and inequality that exists in the United States. We understand that these recent tragedies affect the emotional and mental welfare of all of our students and their families. We would like the entire community, especially our Black community members, to know that we stand with you and are here for you. In times of grief and unrest, we want to reaffirm that we are a community. We must dedicate ourselves to ensuring a safe place for students to learn and feel valued. We are especially missing our students right now. In times of trouble and pain, our classrooms, hallways, libraries, and counseling centers are safe places for us to talk, process our grief, and begin to understand and confront the prejudices and economic inequalities that contribute to tragedies such as these. Our students no doubt feel confused and helpless. We are committed to helping them give voice to their grief and to use our tools as educators to empower them. Thank you very much for allowing us to share our statement.
And thank you very much
There's no other
to, okay. And thank you very much to Mary and to our teaching staff for that message. We very much appreciate that. And you said there were no further public comment, correct? There was no further public comment.
Correct.
Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the 2020-2021 Code of Conduct. Is there a motion to open the public hearing for the Code of Conduct? Thank you, Rebecca. Second. Thank you, Daryl. Any discussion? Okay, we will now have our public hearing for the Code of Conduct. Anyone wish to make comment regarding the Code of Conduct?
There are no comments for the Code of Conduct.
Okay. Anything from the Board of Education or the administration?
Marissa, I think that I'd like to, I know we said we might talk about this maybe in a broader discussion, but I think I'd like to maybe talk about over this, assuming I'm reelected, and if I'm not, then I'd ask the board to, talk about the code of conduct and maybe looking at ways where we can make sure that we're, certainly sensitive to any racial disparities that there might be, and that we're just at the cutting edge of, addressing student issues in terms of maybe employing rate, things like restorative justice. So I'd like us to maybe take a closer look at, our discipline policies.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Any other discussion from the board? Okay, so I have made note of that so that when we do have our retreat this summer, or as we're planning that, we can discuss how we want to proceed with that discussion. Thank you very much for bringing that up. All right, I'm seeing no one else has a comment. We have no public comment. So is there a motion to close the hearing for the Code of Conduct public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly. Second from Rebecca. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Next on the agenda is a public hearing for the Special Patrol Officer and School Information Resource Officer agreements. Is there a motion to open the public hearing? Thank you, Daryl. Second. Thank you, Sherry. Sarah, do we have anyone for public comment on the patrol officer and CIRO agreements?
There are not.
Okay. Board discussion or comment?
I just want to just add one thing on this. This is obviously a time where there are a lot of school districts across the country that are making moves away from CIRO programs because of what's going on in the country. And I'm speaking just as a parent in this district with kids in our schools, I am extremely appreciative for the professionalism that our CIROs have exhibited and continue to exhibit in our schools, and distinguishing them greatly from many of the other things going on around the country today.
Thank you. I agree. I think Elena and I are probably the only people who were on the board when we first started having school resource officers. And, the discussion right now is that, it's about having law enforcement in schools, but I think anyone who knows our school resource officers would know that they are much more than just law enforcement officers. They have built such deep relationships with our students and do such a wonderful job. They are really part of our school community. I'm really glad that we have our school resource officers. They are doing an outstanding job. So I wholeheartedly concur with you on that, Dan. Anyone else? Any other comments on that? Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing on the special patrol officer and school information resource officer agreements? Thank you, Mark. Second from Daryl. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, indicate aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, great. Next on the agenda, item 2.01, Google services. Laura? To close the public hearing on the special patrol officer and school information resource officer agreements. Whoa, I'm hearing my, thank you, Mark. Second from Daryl. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, indicate aye. I've got a backup singer now. Opposed or abstaining? Okay, great. Next on the agenda, item 2.01, Google service.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Laurel Chiesa, Director of Instructional Technology. I'm here this evening with Josh Becker, Senior Network Administrator, and I'm going to be passing the computer over to him in a few minutes. But I'm here tonight. I was asked to talk about the decision that was made for migrating from Outlook to Gmail. So a couple of housekeeping items before I start. July 1st is our target date. This has been a 3-year process, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. Tomorrow morning, there will be an email sent to staff that I'll forward to Sarah to provide to you. And that email provides lots of help documents and tutorials. We have a folder that we created for you with specifics on and details of how to use Gmail and the Google Calendar. Just be mindful that on the 30th, we will be doing the migration from 3 to 6 p.m. We will have a blackout, and by July 1st, we'll be good to go with our new link off of our website or off of Chrome. What determines the purchase or use of any new product is what I thought I would talk about today. It's very involved, especially when there's a district-wide change, and it affects many people. So these are the questions that we think about. What will the tool accomplish that any present products cannot provide? What will benefit in the instruction or productivity, and why is this necessary? So in regards to Google, this started about 6 years ago. There was a request by teachers for single sign-in. At the time, educational products were starting to be used, and teachers would have to set up a classroom manually, add each student, make up a password, teach the students how to log in. And they were noticing that Google was partnering with a lot of products. For example, we have been using for a long time the services of Discovery Education. So they started to see that, well, why can't we, provide accounts for our students with Google? So we started doing that. It does integrate nicely with our educational products. So for example, in our video editing product, it can be saved within Google. So there's a lot of nice pieces with the interface and again, the productivity. And all the teachers at the time were using collaborative Google Docs, and they felt that this was a powerful tool for students. Considerations that we take, because this is a long process, is the instructional and student impact, teacher impact, of course, staff impact. And now, as of January, Ed Law 2D especially, that's prominent. Also, thinking about security and the NIST, and that goes in hand with Ed Law 2D. Of course, cost. Google is free, and the interface. How will everyone, whether it's buildings and grounds, how will everyone be able to learn this product? Well, how quick will it be, etc. Then there is a great deal of the technical setup and the integration with the network. Will it support our network and products that we really use? And then, of course, we have to consider the training. Another piece is that we want to be mindful these days, and that's what we've been talking about the last few months, is making sure that the product can be used online from anywhere in the world. So this is just an idea of our change process. So we have two types of decisions where it's with our software and online subscriptions. Is it a district-wide change or a content or grade level? So when it's content or grade level or department, it's typically a one-year timeline. Now, of course, there may be an exception, as with SOAR with our summer review product, that this is something that was requested by the board, and we need to really focus on that and quickly make our decisions, our shared decision-making. But something especially district-wide, it typically is a two-year timeline, because we want to make sure that the administration, the technology committee, our tech supervisor, Josh, and the tech staff all have a say and an understanding of what's going to be changed and if it's feasible. From there, it then goes to the department supervisors, and then, again, the technical setup is huge, along with training plans. So I forgot to send it over to Josh, but there's some things and considerations that we thought of with Gmail, and that is to think about security and redundancy. So Josh is just going to talk to you a few minutes about that.
Thanks, Laurel. Yeah, so one of the decisions that I had in this play was, obviously, even before COVID, we were trying to make sure that all our platforms are accessible from redundancy. I know we had the issues with our ISP provider with BOCES a couple of years ago. We've had redundancy for internet access to the district. And right now, our current email setup for staff is housed here on site. So we're looking to diversify that. So in the fact of a disaster or anything that happened here locally, we would still have a communication chain with going to Gmail or through any other cloud provider for those kind of services. And the big thing, when we're here at COVID, going to a platform that's accessible for all all platforms that people have at home. We have several different devices that families use and utilize. So to get to the mass, a platform that everybody can use and simply connect to is a big decision making. Like Laurel said, this moving from our on-prem to cloud email has been a couple-year process, and I think we're right on schedule and look for a successful transition.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurel. Oops. Nope. We heard you. Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Josh.
Welcome.
All right. Next on the agenda, is our special services report from Assistant Superintendent Deneen.
Well, thank you. It's always great to have this opportunity. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be able to discuss our special education program, and it's a year in review. It's always a pleasure. And I'm going to start by, as always, looking at some demographics. And can you advance the slide? So currently, as of May 1st, we have 442 school-age students with disabilities that are identified through the Committee on Special Education. Preschool, currently we have 105 3- and 4-year-olds. Our total enrollment for school age, 4,270, and so that gives us a special education population of 10%. The national and state average is 12%. So I believe that our processes are working very well, where we identify the students that require special education, but we're not over-identifying students. We have a very good pre-referral process with response to intervention, where we provide supports and general education prior to the CSE evaluation. And I think that has been very successful in terms of offering supports for students prior to looking at special education support. The next slide. Sarah. We currently have 31 students out of the 431 students with disabilities that are placed in BOCES programs. That's around, that could be in their locations, their segregated locations, such as the Career Training Center or at McAvoy or Cortlandville, but the majority of those placements are in school districts, where the children are transitioned from self-contained classrooms to placements within school districts where they're able to be included with other children at their grade levels. The majority of the 31 students is children with on the autism spectrum disorder, and then severe emotional disturbance and children with mental health disorders. That's pretty common, and it's been consistent for the past 4 or 5 years. We have one student that is multiply disabled, placed in a residential placement, and next year he will be aging out at 21, so next year is his last year in the residential placement. Next. In terms of demographics, there's 13 handicapping conditions, and as you can see, these are the first 7, and learning disabilities, as you can see, is 114. If you advance to the next slide, that these are the remaining handicapping conditions, and other health impaired is 140. Over the last 4 or 5 years or so, we saw this change in the demographics, where historically it's always been learning disabled is the identification that was most prominent and prevalent, along with speech language impairment. And now, the last few years, this, as you can see, has changed, and other health impaired is now the major identification area. And this is the first year it's really exceeded quite a bit, increased over learning disabilities. And I think that just speaks to the trend that we're seeing regionally, statewide, and nationally, that children are having more mental health impairment, and that is the primary reason for the other health impairment. It's either attention deficit disorder or anxiety, depression. Those are probably the 3 most prevalent. I'd like to give you an update on and I talked about this the last few years, but we have, as you would recall, an 811 special education class at Mott Road Elementary. And all of the students in this class are identified with autism. They all have moderate to severe communication disorders and are behaviorally challenged. And we just completed our 3-year research project with researchers from Boston Children's Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and Northeastern University. We have been studying and utilizing a system, it's a visual language called the Visual Immersion System. And along with that, we have been looking at providing supports to children just in time. So when a child needed support from an adult, we were able to create the materials and provide the instruction in the moment. So we measured that, and the one research project that we did was using wearable technology or an Apple Watch. So this was the 3 years of our research. If you could advance, I'll talk a little bit more about the visual supports VIS program before we go on. The picture that you just saw, I just wanted to highlight that this was not possible 3 years ago. If you look at Nadia and then holding hands, she's engaged, she has eye contact, she's smiling. This was not the case 3 years ago. And we have come light years. The children have come light years in their progress over 3 years. And I'm going to be speaking more about that, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what we've been seeing in the classroom. So the next slide talks a little bit about this visual language that was created by Dr. Howard Shane and Dr. Ralph Schlosser, who are the two researchers that we've been dealing with for actually 4 years. But it's a visual language communication. It's very unique. It's different than any other language communication methodology. It uses visual supports, and by that I mean videos and photographs, which the child look at, and when they are able to look at what the expectation is, they clearly understand what to do. This is very different than other communication methodologies that you'd use a grid display, because by looking at the background and the scene of what is expected of them, the research shows that they inherently understand what the expectation is. And our research results have proven that. So it's a functional approach to learning language to communicate needs. And what we have found is through the use of this program that it leads to increased expression and increased understanding of language. And then the children obviously have improved in their communication skills and their ability to get their needs and wants met. The next slide, again, I just want to touch base on why this is so unique than any other system. Some of you might know that there's a methodology that's used widely called the Picture Exchange System. It's PEX. And children use that in order to get their needs and wants met, but it only touches on requesting. You're only teaching the child how to request. With the visual immersion system, as you can see from this graphic, we are teaching 7 different communicative functions to the children. So they're not only learning to request, they are following directives, giving directives, they are learning how to comment, they're asking and answering questions, they're learning how to protest appropriately, they're using this to organize their own day and school materials and their schedules. And social pragmatics is reciprocity of conversation, so the children can learn how to appropriately engage with other children, take turns, and have a conversation back and forth. This system has done all of that, and again, why it's so unique is children on the autism spectrum arena have great difficulty with auditory processing. They cannot process information. They need to see a visual, and this program immerses them in visuals. So that has been a wonderful methodology for us to use, and the 3-year results have been exceedingly promising. So you can go to the next. Again, this is just a photograph, I believe. Again, so you can see the 2 children, Nadia and Ali, are pushing Molly. And why I sent this photo, I wanted you to see this, is again, look at the cooperation. They're working together, they're collaborating and to figure out how to push her across the gym. The other instance is we have used the visual immersion system not only in the special education classroom, but across all environments. The children are immersed in this, and so it's done in all general ed settings. It's done in computer and library, art, music, and PE, and also in the home. We've worked very closely with the parents, so they are using the same methodology in the home, and the parents are so pleased because they have seen growth and development over 3 years. Well, I just want to say one thing that is very disappointing is with the COVID-19 and the closure of school, we just missed the last 3 months of collecting data on this 3-year research project. And so we had to use our last data point in January, which I'll go through the results in a moment. So we're very disappointed in that, but we're still moving ahead and forging ahead with publishing our results. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. The next is, I wanted you to see this very short video. This little girl is Molly, and 3 years ago, Molly was very aggressive. She was nonverbal. She was in her own world. She could not follow a one-step direction. And as you see here, she's using an iPad, and on that is touch chat, which is a communication method, but there's visuals behind that. She is going to independently give a directive using touch chat to Alexa to get what she wants, which is to hear her favorite song. Sarah, can you play?
Play happy.
That,
Alexa. Play happy. Play happy.
Happy by Pharrell Williams. Okay, dance.
It's quite remarkable when you see a little girl who really was trapped in her own world and couldn't communicate, couldn't get her wants and needs met. And here she is independently telling Alexa, which is really sophisticated technology, to play a song and get her needs and wants met. The next video, this was a lengthy one, and Sarah and I cut it down. I just wanted you to be able to see, again, this is incredibly remarkable because as you see, these are, and you're only going to get to see a couple of the children, but a lot is going on here. You have the teacher and the speech therapist working together, collaborating and co-teaching. They're using the smartboard. Through Air Server, the smartboard has the information shared on the individual iPads that the kids are using. They're going to be doing a Halloween activity to follow a directive to open a pumpkin jack-o'-lantern, to top off the pumpkin, and to close it. But what I want you to notice here is 3 years ago, these children were on all different parts of the room. They could not work together. They could not sit together. They were one-on-one with a teaching assistant or a teacher because they didn't have the skill set to be able to work as a group. And you're going to see them all sitting, being engaged, looking at the smartboard and doing the activity. And each child is at a different level. Again, what's remarkable is some of these children, again, like you see with Molly, who was completely nonverbal, are now speaking and actually reading words and following 1- and 2-step directives. So we'll just play a portion of this.
We have been carving. We carved the jack-o'-lantern. This is the way we make his eyes. Make his eyes. Make his eyes. This is the way we make his eyes. This is our jack-o'-lantern. We have our jack-o'-lantern, a pumpkin. We're carving. This is the way we make his nose. Make his nose. Make his nose. This is the way we make his nose. This is our jack-o'-lantern. About the girl carving the pumpkin. Okay, let's practice with our pumpkin. Uh-oh. Okay, we'll do Molly first. Molly's turn. Molly, open the pumpkin. Open the pumpkin. You did it. See, Molly opened the pumpkin. Good. See, Jacob? Very good, Molly. Oh, okay, we'll go. That's all right. Close the pumpkin. Molly, close the pumpkin.
So we cut that a little short because I think I'm running a little over, but I just wanted you to be able to see that we use these visual supports. We're showing the child what the expectation is by showing them a video, and then we give it to them on paper. They're watching it on the smart board, and they're able to comply with directives now. In terms of the project results, as I said, it was very disappointing that we lost this spring, but looking at the results from our data point in January, we have 8 students in the project, the research project. For those 8 students, there were 24 goals that we were trying to assess very specifically whether they met those goals or not. And we use something called the GAS, which is the Goal Attainment Scale, which is very specific. It's a 5-point rating scale from -2 to 0, where we want them to be, to +1, +2. +2 would be growth by the end of the school year. Well, out of those 24 goals, in January, all 8 students passed most, if not all, of their communication and language goals. In fact, 22 out of the 24 goals were significant improvement, and 4 of the students had their 6 goals. They actually were discontinued because they reached a +2, which would have been what we had hoped for. We would have hoped for 0 by the end of June, and they scored at the highest level of +2. And that's why the researchers are just, they just are blown away by the results, because the children have been making such growth and progress. So we, as I said, we have to stop the research, but that doesn't mean that we are not going to publish what we are doing. The Mott Road staff, which consisted of Lindsay O'Neill, speech therapist Jackie Cullen, Andrea Benz, Laurel Chiesa, who's right here with me, and myself, we are all co-authors with the researchers. And we have just sent, and I have a copy if you'd like to see it, our abstract research project from the 3 years, and it was just sent to Advances in Neurodevelopmental Disorders Journal. So we're going to be published, and the title of it is Coaching a School Team to Implement the Visual Immersion System in a Classroom for Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder. And what's remarkable about that is we are the first and only school district ever to work with these researchers and to try the visual immersion system in a public school. And as I said, the results are so promising that we're really hopeful that this is going to spread the word far and wide. The other thing is that we have just written and submitted a chapter. There's a professor named Dr. William Ogletree at the Western Carolina University, and he's writing a book on challenges and solutions for augmentative communication systems, and we have a chapter that we just wrote on challenges and solutions of using the visual immersion system in a public school setting. So that is being published, and we're very proud of our work. Next is just another video so that you can see the kids and how they're working together.
Go! Rivik is pulling. Nadia is pushing Molly.
Remarkable because it just shows the cooperative efforts of children working together, which almost never happens. And again, we're using the VIS across all school environments. The next, I'm just going to read to you, this is final thoughts from Dr. Shane. As I said, we've been working with him for 4 years, and he says, over the past 3 years for the research project, we have been engaged in a classroom-based research project held at Mott Road Elementary. The primary goal of this research was to study the efficacy of an educational approach that incorporates technology and visual supports. What is made this undertaking especially remarkable is the fact that we have been able to measure significant improvement within the normal operations of a special education classroom. It's a rare accomplishment in special education. In closing, I must say that the interaction and cooperation between the FM school administration, the Mott Road administration, the classroom team, which is the special ed teacher and the speech pathologist, Laurel is the information technology director, and the Children's Hospital and Harvard research team has been nothing short of extraordinary. I briefly want to touch and bring your attention to Indicator 8. Every year, the State Ed Department has school districts provide information about certain aspects, whether it's preschool or school age. And the one that we had to do this year was a parent questionnaire, and it's really a parent satisfaction survey. And the survey topics were, what were the school's efforts to partner with parents? What has been the impact of special education services on your family? And what was your parent participation? So we were only directed from State Ed to send out 81 surveys. We chose to send out 501 surveys to every school-age parent of a student with disability and all preschool parents. And we received 84 back. If you could go to the next slide. We had a positive parent response rate of 96.4. Our target by State Ed was 95%. And as you can see, we exceeded the percent positive parent response rate. Next slide. This is the third time that we have done this. The first parent questionnaire was distributed in 06-07. The second was 2012-13. In 2007-8, there was no New York State target, but our positive parental response was 95.5%. In 2012-13, the target was 90%, and our positive parental response was 97.4. I do have a copy of the survey questions response analysis that Potsdam College did for State Ed, and I have that available if you would like to see a copy of that. In terms of future directions, where are we going? Next year, we are going to expand our use of the visual immersion system. We already have 1211 classroom at Wellwood Middle School, but the interesting thing is that the 5 students who have been in our research class for the last 3 years will be moving into 5th grade at Wellwood. So it has been so successful that we feel it's incumbent upon us to continue the program. So we will be doing that. We are expanding our research project to incorporate some qualitative research where we are actually going to be creating and using the visual language applications. We're going to be creating computer apps so that we enhance the language and communication of students, and it will be an easier way for teachers to create these materials at a moment's notice. We're going to expand our study of using Apple Watches on students so that they can receive the information in an Apple Watch and follow a directive and fade back the adult support to increase independence and self-sufficiency. And we're continuing our work at the high school where we're using QR codes both in activities of daily living and in the pre-vocational work sites so that students will be able, again, to increase their self-sufficiency by understanding what the directives are from using a QR code rather than being told what to do by an adult. So exciting times in special ed. I think I went way over my time, but I'm very proud of our work, and I just want to thank all our teaching staff and Laurel. It's been a group effort, and it's really paying off for the families and the children. So thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. Great report. Do we have any questions from the board?
Lisa, that was great. Really inspiring. I was just wondering, what kind of feedback you're getting from parents with how the children are doing at home, how this is what they're learning and what they're able to accomplish in the classroom, how that's playing out, in the home setting.
I think it's very. Wait, make it.
I'm sorry. I think it's very similar to Gen Ed, that it's a mixed bag. We have some parents that, and at the beginning was daunting, no question, but it was daunting for all parents because we were thrown into this without a lot of preparation. But we have parents that, and children are struggling, and then we have other parents that are telling us that this has been a godsend and that the students are flourishing. So that holds true for this 811 class at Mott Road, and it holds true for the entire K-12 special ed, that it's a combination of both. And we have some parents that are looking forward to in-person services, and then we have other parents that are very fearful because a lot of the children have suppressed immune systems and are very medically fragile. So we're just trying to work through this sensitively, and we're always worried about health and safety. And in fact, we had a meeting today. Craig and I participated in a BOCES-wide meeting with the 23, almost all of the other component districts. And together, we're trying to be unified and trying to look at the parameters of what we should be offering for summer program, let alone fall program, waiting guidance from the Department of Health, waiting guidance from state ed. But we're all trying to put our heads together to figure out what is the best way to handle safety and security and health issues and, PPE for staff and students and how to navigate through some of these issues, and then what is the best system. So we don't have an answer today, but more meetings are following next week, and we're planning, plan A, plan B, plan C, so that we will have something up and running for this summer.
Thank you, Lisa. Not an easy task, I know.
Lisa, it's Daryl. Just great reporting. Thank you so much. I just want to understand, going forward from your 3-year work with Dr. Shane, are we now able to use those techniques wherever and whenever we wish? Are we bound by any copyright laws or anything? We just
No, actually, we're still in our, he's still going to be consulting with us, and we have established such a great partnership that he troubleshoots and problem solves with us. So he has really expanded his work with his consultation piece. So across the district in our 6 schools, we have had children with very difficult communication systems, or they're very puzzling in terms of how best to meet their needs. And he has consulted and helped us develop communication plans, and that will continue for next year.
Terrific. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Lisa, the board? Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Next on the agenda, item 2.03, our summer program. Mary Coughlin.
Thank you. We are pleased to offer the Summer Online Academic Review Program, SOAR, as an additional opportunity for students to continue their academics this summer. The online program is, I mentioned at the last meeting, intended for students for whom there may be a desire or a need to strengthen knowledge and skills with targeted review, practice, games in core academic areas. And students will be working on one of two platforms from a company called Edmentum, Exact Path, which will be for students in grades K through 2, and Study Island grades 3 through 11. It's a 5-week program, July 6th to August 7th. During this time, the expectation is that students will devote approximately 2 hours online per week to SOAR. The platforms are web-based. Students will need access to the internet and a device. And as we did these last couple of months, if students need a Chromebook, we certainly would provide those to students in need. We have hired teachers who will serve as course supervisors. In this role, the teachers won't be providing direct instruction, rather they'll be assigned and responsible for a roster of students at a grade level and provide students and parents with the initial directions, support, monitor student progress as they're working along, calibrate the student review and practice, and also be emailing progress reports to parents. The teachers will be trained on Friday from our training team from Edmentum, and then planning will continue next week. We closed registration last week. We have approximately 475 students enrolled at this time. Let's see, we sent out a confirmation registration confirmation that students were registered today to parents, and we'll be sending more detailed information as soon as we get through the training and the planning. So we are really excited for this opportunity. We have a great group of teachers who will be involved and a good number of students, and we're just about ready to go. This program, I should mention also, is in addition, FM will be participating in the BOCE's summer school for high school students and those are high school students in need of course credit. So that's a very different program than that.
And the BOCES program is online as well, correct? The summer
Correct.
program? Okay.
Mhm.
Do we know how many students have signed up for the BOCES program this summer?
The high school program, no. The registration for that will be upcoming.
Okay. Questions for Mary about the summer program? Okay.
Right, Dan, just real quick, what distribution have you seen of the 475 that registered between elementary, middle, high school? Do you know what that breakdown is?
I do. Well, we offered it to K-12 and 12th grade seniors, 0. So I can start there. K through 2, it's, I believe, about 165 students. And high school, we have just about 20 students in the high school. So the remaining are at the middle school level. I could get you those exact numbers when we finalize the registration, but very heavy K1, 2, and then actually higher in 7th and 8th than in 5th and 6th.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary.
Sure.
Next item on the agenda is the president's report. So as I let the board know, I will be participating in the reopening state ed task force on Wednesday. And I did get a lot of feedback from teachers in regards to some of the concerns that they have. The state actually sent out a formal survey to different teacher groups, and I did hear back from a lot of our teachers and TAs here in FM. And a lot of their concerns centered around, of course, social distancing. You know, how do you do that in a school setting? How are we going to be able to keep our students the appropriate distance apart? And also, how are we going to make sure that our students are maintaining, if they have to wear the face mask, and also they're looking at issues related to our more vulnerable students, students who may be more more likely to be infected, as well as some of our staff who have underlying health conditions, how their needs will be addressed as buildings reopen. There was a lot of concern for our special education students and how we would meet their needs. If we have to do distance learning, how we can improve, or how the state will support us in improving, providing services to special education students. There was also a lot of feedback about mental health. They would like the state to make sure that they are providing guidance and assistance to school districts as far as helping or supporting the mental health of our, not just our students and teachers, but also our families in general. So those were some of the themes that are common things that I heard back from the teachers about their concerns that they wanted me to share at the meeting. Also about testing. If we open our buildings, big concern was testing. You know, are we going to test every day? How is that process going to work? And then also time. We obviously need a lot of time to plan, and so hoping that the state will issue guidance for whatever plan that we need to do, whether it's going to be some hybrid or going back into the buildings in August as soon as possible, so that they can plan, especially those who are working with the special education students who are seeking a lot of time to make sure that they can have plans in place. So those are the things that I'm going to be bringing forth to the meeting from our teaching staff. And I don't know if there were additional things that board members had thought of that they wanted me to mention at the meeting as well, but I would be open to hear those at this time. Our teachers covered it, didn't they?
Marissa, you had a lot you said, and you covered a lot of great ideas. I just want to make sure it's clarified that, you know, if there's some sort of hybrid, I wouldn't want to see teachers put in a position where they have to both prepare lessons online and prepare lessons for their classroom. So as long as that's addressed, that teachers aren't doing double the work.
You know, that reminds me, one other issue that came up was a lot of the focus, well, all the focus has been on distance learning using computers, but there were a couple comments about, you know, especially for the younger kids, is it a good idea, or should the state consider going back to paper and having paper assignments delivered to those students as a form of engagement instead of just having the screen time? So that was something else that I found interesting in the comments I thought I'd mention. Is there any other thoughts from the board?
So, Marissa, one other just on the non-teaching side of it, more the financial side of it, which there's going to be a lot of impact. But if there are going to be mandates as part of this in terms of temperature checks, masks, other face guards, obviously all of these things have expenses. And I'd certainly be hoping to hear from the state that we would be receiving additional assistance in some form in procurement and payment of those, so we don't get yet another unfunded mandate from the state.
Very good point. Okay. I happen to be listening in on the town of Manlius meeting, their regular board meeting. And I found it interesting. There was they're working on some kind of comprehensive plan to look at a lot of different issues in the town of Manlius. And one of the issues that they have put on the table to have some conversation about is they want to discuss a merger of school districts within the town of Manlius. Now, I'm sure maybe some of you have heard about efforts to have a countywide school district, but they're very specifically talking about a merger of school districts within the town of Manlius, which would be portions of ESM, a little bit of Pompey and FM. And it was startling because I hadn't heard that before, and I just happened to be listening in on that meeting. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention in case you hear some discussion about that. I think at some point, if they are going to proceed with that discussion, our superintendent and or legislative liaison should reach out and see where they're going with that and what the thoughts are behind that. I certainly want to make sure we're at the table as they go forth with that discussion. If you want to see that discussion, they have their meetings. You can go onto their Facebook page, and it's in the last 10 minutes of their last meeting. I'll save you watching the entire meetings in the last 10 minutes of it. I think that was it for me. Board self-evaluations. We can finish those up, and then I will be getting an email out to the board about a date to look at our board self-evaluation. We do have a special meeting coming up on the 19th from 9 to 11. We'll finish our superintendent evaluation, and we have a few personnel actions that we will take action on at that time as well. And that is it for my report. I will pass it over to Dr. Tice now for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Mims. Under the superintendent's report for this evening, under internal operations, as all of you know, the annual school budget vote and Board of Education elections will culminate with the counting of the absentee ballots tomorrow beginning at 5 p.m. The event will be live streamed on the YouTube channel. Ballot envelopes will be opened and then shuffled in order for them to be randomly sorted for the counting process. This will ensure anonymity. Our election inspectors will work in teams of 2 to record and tally the individual ballots, and our district clerk will report out on the results at the culmination of the tabulation of votes for all of the propositions. Under community relations, we are in receipt of about 24 form letters from concerned citizens who would like the school to do more to prepare our current and future students to be promoters of racial equality, equity, and justice. So we are busy at this time taking those letters, and we will be formulating a response on behalf of the school district to those individuals. Under administration, the administration continues to plan ahead for the reopening of the district. As you might expect, while much of the direction will no doubt be determined by executive order, we as a school district will need to examine internally our disinfecting and cleaning practices, transportation procedures, food service, and classroom instruction in the event that we are able to reopen in the autumn. As you are aware from President Mims' report, our school district is well represented on the upcoming regional reopening team, so hopefully we will be able to hear many of the details in the weeks ahead that will allow us to plan accordingly. Under non-instructional operations, we will continue to work with Phelps Columbus Renewables with respect to 2 solar farms, which they have proposed for within school district boundaries. As you are aware, we engaged our legal counsel to help negotiate a potential pilot agreement on behalf of the taxpayers. Under personnel, I'd like to thank Mr. Gordon and members of the administrative team and our teacher leaders for their efforts to continue the recruitment and search process even during the pandemic. While virtual meetings have replaced the in-person interviews, our interview teams have ensured that the district is moving forward in an effort to attract and hire the best candidates for the vacancies which currently exist. Under students, Dr. Kilmer continues to stay in touch with members of our senior class with respect to commencement exercises. We are hoping to hear something within the next couple of weeks that will allow us to schedule our graduation exercises for outdoor on the stadium turf during the month of July. Our senior class participated in a ceremonial grad walk parade at their former elementary schools where they were able to pick up their caps and gowns. I will certainly keep the board posted as to our progress in this area. Under instruction, our school district will dispatch the family survey that we've discussed before after the school budget vote, so it's not confusing, so that we can ascertain feedback regarding the remote learning environment during the pandemic. This feedback will be used with the recent survey results that Dr. Coughlin gathered from our faculty in order to help organize our staff development efforts for the summer. The online survey will be open for about a week so that FM families are able to complete the questionnaire. The survey, which was created in partnership with Faculty Stewardship, will be accompanied by a cover letter that provides the context for these series of questions. And then last but not least, under construction, we remain excited about the impending capital improvement project at Wellwood Middle School. The construction project will include a new addition and renovations designed to make instructional improvements to the building. Presently, the demolition work has commenced on the facade of the building where the new addition and parking lot will be constructed. I'm pleased to inform you that our Buildings and Grounds team was able to salvage components from prior to the demolition, which can be repurposed in our other school buildings in an effort to save the taxpayers money. As mentioned in my backup information to the Board of Education, the modular classroom suite that will serve as swing space for our students at Wellwood during the project will begin to arrive sometime next week from the fabricator who is located in Pennsylvania. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Questions for Dr. Tice? Okay. Next on the agenda, item 2.06, committee and representative updates. Is there anything from audit?
There is, even though we ended up with a meeting last week, thanks to the members of the audit committee for coming together with that. We have interviews for RFPs for external auditor. Those will be conducted on the 24th. We've got it narrowed down to 3 entities who are coming in for an interview, and we look forward to giving a recommendation to the full board.
Thank you. Any questions for Tim? Okay. Community relations? Anything from community relations right now?
We rescheduled our meeting to Wednesday from last week, so I will report at the next meeting.
Thank you. Facilities, Dan?
We have had 2 meetings. We met on May 20th, and there's minutes from that, and then we met again on June 4th. The minutes everybody's got access to for the meeting on the 20th. I don't think that there was a significant, there wasn't a lot that wasn't in there other than just, we're really trying to figure out the right size timeline for the next capital project, because obviously there is an understanding that there remain a lot of critical instruction needs and hard facility needs in the district going forward, and figuring out what the timing of that is. Bill has been good enough to continue to provide us with schedules of when debt is falling off, to try to see what we could put together that best addresses the instructional needs without tax impact or with minimal tax impact. And those debts for current debt is really scheduled to fall off in the 23-24 and 24-25 academic years, which really leads us much more to be discussed as we do it, but leading toward the potential of a referendum on that next fall. But more to come on that as we move forward. We had our second meeting on June 4th, and that was really a focused meeting with King and King, which I think was a really productive meeting to really just make sure that we had the right staffing, both to oversee the Wellwood project with a really close review so that everything stays on target and tracked properly with that, but still allowing us adequate resources out of King and King to focus on where our focus really needs to be at this point, which is what we've discussed as a board, which is future planning, and putting together the true long-range capital improvement project. So they've ensured us the personnel resources that we need to do that. And we have another meeting coming up that's to be scheduled. We need to get a doodle out, I think, on Sarah on that one, on just putting together everything that's been identified so far in terms of both instructional needs and hard facility needs. So we should have that list at our next facilities meeting. And I think it'd be very important to share that with the full board after that meeting so that everybody can have a good understanding on what's been identified so far as as district-wide needs that still need to be addressed. So that's the recap of where we're at right now.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for Dan? Okay. Next, policy. I don't think we've met since the last meeting. We have a meeting tomorrow, right, Elena? You're on mute.
May 18th, that was the last board meeting, but did we have I don't think we've had a regular board meeting since then, have we? I should know. I have everything right here.
Now, the 29th, I think, was a board meeting after that. So I think this is the
yeah,
first
so
board meeting.
I was not at the meeting on the 18th, so someone else would have to summarize what occurred during that meeting. If they would like.
I can. Certainly, you'll see later tonight on the agenda, we have some policies that are part of our regular review process, as well as some other policies from first reading going into second reading. So we've been chipping away, and I know the policy committee wanted to engender a discussion with the board about future plans. And I can turn it back over to Elena about whether we stay with Erie 1 or consider other options.
I think it's a conversation that is important to be had, and hopefully in the very near future, so that we could really lay out the pros and cons of staying with Erie 1 BOCES or going back to our NISBA policy serve organization. So, and I think that not only is it a financial, you would look at the financial segment of it, but I think we also need to look at services that we're receiving, and as a district, the amount of work that's necessary to review whatever recommendations are made, and really balancing off where that best value is for all involved.
In checking back to my notes from that meeting, in terms of that discussion, we did talk about, I think Bill and Craig gave us the recommendation that NISBA would want us to, their recommendation was to pay NISBA for the services now, while we have it in our budget, because we don't know what will happen going forward. And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but I did take that note. That's because
we had talked about that, to give ourselves some options going forward. But I know the committee in general wanted to engender a larger discussion with the entire board, because there was a time when we had shorter policies and there was a desire by the board to have quantity, a lot of different policies to cover all areas. But at the same time, if those policies, as the committee members know, go into too much detail, every time a law changes, it compels us to modify our policies accordingly, where sometimes we were trying to balance the less is more, but to still make sure we had the entire field covered with all the different policies.
And my bigger,
I don't know if any other members want to speak to that.
I just wanted to mention, in conjunction with that, my bigger concern is the amount of time that administrators are required to spend reviewing everything yet again with all those changes that are put forward to us. And for me, I feel that their time could be better served doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So this is obviously something we've talked about in policy committees for many months now at this point, and I don't think it's a new topic to anybody, but as Dr. Tice said, it's really the question of many times less is more, and the Erie 1 policy recommendations we've been getting are the opposite of that. They're very lengthy. They're very different than what the historical FM policy was. And I just want to mention, aside from anybody's personal opinions on the board on this, that when we asked the members of the administrative team who were present for those meetings I won't call anybody out specifically on the screen, you know, you are, was that we move back to the less is more, that the lengthy, highly detailed regulations can be in administrative regulations, and they don't need to be in policies, so that we don't need to update policy, as Dr. Tice said, every single time there's a new law that's passed down. So the administrative team gave us their very candid opinion that a move back toward the more concise NISBA policies would be preferable for their time and administration of the policies.
So I don't know, is now the time for board members to weigh in? I couldn't agree more with less is more. And I just think the policies are tighter, not only for administrative team and the board, but also for the general public to be able to navigate the policies when they go look for them. Just some of them are just so cumbersome and hard to understand, and a lot of legalese. So I think for all those reasons and what's been stated, I would really strongly advocate for that direction sooner than later.
Yeah, I also agree. I guess my question is, you know, when there is a legal change, are we're talking about kind of simplifying at the policy level, so that if there is a specific legal change, those can be appropriately addressed within the regulations? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with both of you and Mr. Seidberg and Ms. Romano. I think, and Ms. Lindars, I think what we're trying to do is the policy will have the compass points, and the details, as Mr. Seidberg said, would be in the administrative regulation. They'd still be visible for everybody to see, but they're much more nimble. They only require administrative edits as opposed to first and second readings at the board level. The board would still control the 30,000-foot view and would control the compass points, but the actual details would be captured in the regulations.
You'll actually see that in a couple of the policies that are on the agenda later tonight, where the Erie 1 recommendation was very lengthy. We had a very concise existing policy, and the recommendation that came out of committee was, instead of changing our existing policy, it was to keep the existing policy and then use the Erie 1 recommendation as essentially the template for the administrative regulation. So we started on that path a little bit, but as Dr. Tice said, I think we all should be able to agree that if we're going to make a move, if there's consensus to do that, then the sooner the better to start that process.
Yeah, it sounds like we're pretty much in agreement. What do we need to do? Put it on the next meeting's agenda?
Wouldn't we have to spend the money before July 1st? Is that correct, Bill?
Yes, we can encumber those funds to roll them over into next year. That's not a problem.
Do you need an action of the board to do that, or is that just something you would be able to do?
I think that's something that we would be able to do if you wanted to put it on the reorg meeting to adopt the Erie 1. I'm sorry, not the Erie 1, but the New York State School Board's policies going forward, then, you know, that would be fine.
You're muted, Eleanor.
It was getting loud in the background here, and I forgot that I muted myself. Sarah, will you have the time to do the appropriate work that's necessary in preparation for this? Because you're going to have to go to NISBA.
I will have to talk to them about the transition process. I arrived in 2015 after the Erie 1 transition had already begun. I think Dr. Tice and I will come up with a plan that we can present to policy committee. I don't anticipate any problems.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
To that point, the one thing that we did talk about, and we did ask Dr. Tice to very specifically weigh in, was there's a lot of time that will have to be invested in the transition back to NISBA, which would mean more policy committee meetings with greater regularity, but also by default, more administrative time in the transition. And we were obviously mindful of that because there is so much unanticipated planning time that's going to be obviously spent this summer dealing with what this fall may look like. And that's obviously the biggest priority. So we have talked that through, and he still did feel that there was the time and ability to move forward with that now.
It might be slightly less work than the transition to Erie 1 because some of the policies remained in the NISBA format. So it might not be as heavy a lift as it was going the other direction.
And as the policy committee will recall, there were fewer policies under NISBA, and while at first glance it may not look like much, but when you take it in the totality of all the policies, it is a significant savings not having to delve into that. I would recommend that, just like we did before, the existing policies remain in force until the policy committee brings the others through on first and second readings to replace them.
Okay, sounds like we have a plan to move forward with that. Thank you, everyone. All right, next is Education Foundation. Sherry has any update?
For Education Foundation, there is a meeting, a final end of year meeting on Wednesday, so I can update at our next meeting.
Thank you. Legislative liaisons, Tim and Sherry.
We received an email this morning from the FMTA. They are asking that we adopt a resolution in support of increased state and federal funding being provided to offset COVID losses. And there's a sample resolution that they provided to us. So since I just received it today, it's not provided to everybody, but I would ask that on their behalf, we discuss this at the next meeting.
You'll send that email out to the board and then we'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting to consider adopting that resolution.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I don't think Hall of Distinction, is there anything new with that or anything changed? I think.
No, that's being moved off to the fall. We still need to work on a date, which obviously is dependent on everything else. Can I just add one real quick thing on the Education Foundation? When the senior signs were available for distribution, the day that they were distributed in the district office parking lot, we got hit by a lovely monsoon. And I just want to thank Dr. Kilmer, graciously came out and helped and got soaked through that, as did Dr. Tice. So I just want to thank them for helping in that distribution process in the rain.
And Mr. Seidberg, who tried to salvage the paper, right, during the torrential downpour that he was checking off the list of names. So it was a lot of fun, just like being at a water park.
Yeah.
I think I missed it by 5 minutes.
Get out of there just in time.
You could all be postal workers.
Student board member, Maddie. Would you like to give us your final update?
I know, kind of sad. I thought Dr. Tice did a great job covering where we're at with graduation right now. Still pretty up in the air, but I think we are hoping to have an in-person graduation, which would be great, in July. And then the broadcast journalism class and teachers have been doing a great job keeping up with some of the traditions that we usually see at the end of the year. So we had the virtual award nights, the senior slideshow, and the senior video coming up, which has been great to see all that. And I do want to thank the FM Education Foundation. They did a great job with the yard signs. I really like driving around town and just seeing where everyone lives now because I never knew that before.
That's
But
fun.
so yeah, that is all I have.
Thanks, man.
Would anybody
Thank you
like to
for
hear
your-
from the finance committee?
Yes, I would.
Are you here, Mark?
Excellent. At our meeting on June 8th, we had a robust discussion on the end of the fund balance forecast, which will be healthy this year due to the school shutdown. However, you'll note in further agenda items, we're going to be talking about proposed reserve balances, which we're going to need to meet some of the challenges coming up for the 2021 fiscal year, in light of the fact that there may be possible aid cuts to school districts in New York State, depending on the economy. We did touch upon a cash flow forecast that Bill's staff will be providing the Finance Committee and the board to look at so we can plan ahead for any blips. We also discussed the cafeteria fund and the challenges that we're going to be faced moving forward in the 2021 fiscal year. And that wraps it up.
Hey, Mark, I have a question.
Sure.
It seems to me that, well, in particular, there's one reserve that I know appears to be new. I'd like to hear what the rationale was on doing that versus simply adding a little bit more to some of the other reserves, even if you weren't to include the capital reserve within that thought process.
Sure, I can address it from my perspective, or would you like to hear from Bill?
Doesn't matter, or it could be both or one of you, it doesn't matter.
Okay. My perspective and what I understood from discussions with Bill is that certain of the liability reserves are specific to tax certiorari's, so you'd have to take a sampling of what's reasonable out there. Even though you're allowed to add to that, it has to be within reason. This new reserve that you're referring to is a $2.6 million, and that's up to, it's not to say all the money's going to be in there right away, but an up to amount, which is like a general liability, so that as we need the flexibility to take current end of year fund balance and move it to these reserves, if God forbid our aid is cut by up to, the governor said, possibly 20%, we can use those to preserve our programs and the commitments to the student population going forward. So it is a bit unusual, but these are unusual times. And I'll let Bill provide any more detail he thinks might be prudent.
Sure. Basically several reserves, the tax certiorari, the employee benefit accrued liability reserve, the workers' comp reserve, those are all reserves built on hard calculations that are audited each year when we close the books. The liability reserve that you reference gives us a little more flexibility. The 2.6 million is the maximum amount that we could put in. I don't think we're going to have that much to put in, but the nice part about that particular reserve is it's really a little more objective in terms of how much we fund it, what ability we would have in the future than to say, we don't need that much in the liability reserve. Can we then appropriate that money as fund balance and, offset any state aid reductions that we might see, not only in this next year, but I feel that this is going to be a multi-year problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mark or Bill? Okay. All right. Next on the agenda then is new business. Starting with approval of the minutes from the Monday, May 11th regular board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the May 11th regular board meeting minutes? Thank you, Tim. Second from Mark. Any discussion of the minutes? All those in favor, please state aye. Raising your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the special meeting held on May 19th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from May 19th?
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly. Second from Rebecca. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand to indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining?
I'm abstaining because I missed the public session.
Okay, one abstention. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the May 26th special board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from May 26th? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Daryl. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining?
Abstaining.
We have one abstention from Elena. Okay. Next on the agenda, item 3.04. Is there a motion to approve the personnel actions as recommended by the superintendent? Thank you, Daryl. Second from Sherry. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? We have two abstentions, Daryl and Tim. Okay. Next on the agenda, item 3.05 is a resolution for our reorganization meeting date. Is there a motion that the Board of Education hereby set the 2020-21 reorganization meeting for July 6th, 2020? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Sherry. Discussion.
I know I will not be here on that day, so I don't know what everyone else's schedules are like, and I don't know if we could do it prior to the 4th instead of after the 4th. I mean, normally we have a discussion prior to, just so that we're certain that we can get as many board members as possible present for the reorg meeting.
So you're the proposed date is July 6th. So you were suggesting the week of July 1st in Elena?
Yeah, and you know what? I really should look at that calendar. Yes, I was. So like prior to, so either the 1st or the 2nd, or the 3rd.
And I cannot do the 1st.
Or it could be 13th as well, if you want to stay to Mondays.
Could be the
But it
13th.
just has to be done before the 15th.
Does well, if we want to keep to a Monday, does July 13th work for everyone on the board right now?
Works for me.
Mark, I see your hand up. Is that yes? It works.
Yes, it works.
Okay, so we're good with that date. Is there any reason why we couldn't do it on that date, Sarah? Does that date work for any requirements, et cetera, we need to meet? We're good. So we're going to move the reorg meeting date to July 13th. So is there, excuse me, a motion?
I can make a motion to amend that resolution.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Elena to amend the resolution to read setting the reorg date for July 13th. Is there a second to that? Thank you, Sherry. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, next on the agenda.
Thank you everyone for that.
Item 3.06. Proposed Board of Education 2020-21 meeting calendar. So we have proposed dates for the upcoming year. We have some contingency dates built in. I would remind the board, please act as though those are actual board meetings because we usually end up using them. Is there a motion to approve the Board of Education 2020-21 meeting calendar? Thank you, Sherry. Second from Daryl. Discussion?
Yeah, I just have a question. I thought we were going to have a discussion at the end of this year before we set the calendar about this experiment that we did this year from going to 2 meetings a month, which often became 3 instead of 1. And I just thought we were going to have a discussion from everybody's input on that before we went ahead and set the schedule for next year.
And here we are.
Here we go.
So if we have some, I know, and this month was crazy with meetings. I really do not like the word doodle at this point. We ended up having to have quite a few little extra side meetings and other meetings this month, and that just happens in June. But, we did try to keep it to 2 meetings, and then life happens, and then 2020 happens.
So sorry, go ahead, Marissa. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so in looking at this, I noticed that most months, unlike last year where we actually had 2 meetings listed, on this one, most months have 1 meeting per month. And then I don't think there are any that have 2 dates that are meetings. And then there's the contingency just in case we have something else. So it looks like we've gone back to the way we did it 2 years ago, not this year with the 2 meetings per month.
It does get to be quite a bit to have 2 meetings a month on top of committee meetings and other things. So, I mean, sometimes it's necessary, but if we could, I think we've gotten a little better this year at the structure of our meetings and getting more done. And I think we'll get even better next year. We'll be a little bit more efficient. What do other people think about the schedule? No, Tim's like, good luck.
Well, at least you won't have me droning on at the meeting, so that should speed it along. Just
Yeah, right.
It's a little bit more manageable for me, so compared to this past year, but you still have some extra contingencies set in there. So what is the number compared to last year? Do we know the difference? I'm sorry.
I don't remember how many we had this year, but we definitely had we had 2 meetings pretty much every month. And then on top of that, there were, like in November, I think it was November, we had a retreat built in there. And then we've had what's not reflected on here, which will take place, is like our superintendent evaluation that requires an additional meeting or 2. So there are other things that will be added to the calendar. So we will have extra meetings unless we use some of those contingency dates for some of those. But I think we have less meetings than we did last year or this year.
I don't think our meetings were a lot shorter than they were other years. So like you said, I think we're getting a little bit more efficient, or we did certainly this year as the year went on. So I like the schedule.
Daryl, I see you lighting up over there. I mean your box, not you personally.
Yes, thank you. No, I'm good with it. I think as Sherry pointed out, if we have an additional date in a month, it's a tentative date or a contingency date. So, I mean, as you said, life happens and we may need more than are listed, but this is a good start.
Other feedback from the board?
I think I'm a little conflicted because the past few months we've had less on the agenda because we were trying to focus and, we haven't had much executive session. So I just, if we're going to go back to essentially 1 meeting a month, let's just be, remember why we wanted to do the 2 a month in the beginning was because we were heading towards 11 and even midnight some nights, and, to head into executive session on important topics at such a late time is difficult. So, I don't know if we just consistently try to move executive session material earlier or whatever we have to do. But I think we need to be mindful that I think all of our attention spans tend to, after a long day of work or whatever you have going on, to have, a 5-hour meeting is tough.
Mm-hmm. So,
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm fine with this as long as we just try to, we should of course hear from everybody, but just be mindful of the time.
I did a rough count and I think this proposed calendar is approximately 5 meetings less than our current year's meeting schedule.
Thank you. Okay.
Rough count.
It's a good start.
Okay. So I had a first and a second. We've had some discussion. I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of approving the proposed Board of Education 2020-21 meeting calendar, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye.
With one modification, which is the July 6th date.
Ah, yes. Thank you for pointing that out, Dan. Yes. So approving the 2020 meeting calendar with the amended reorganization meeting date. Thank you for catching that.
Okay.
Raising your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next on the agenda, we have some policies in first reading. Is there a motion that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius School District hereby move the following policies into second reading at the next board meeting? Policy number 5661 revised, 7221 revised, 7230 revised, 7280 revised, 8120 rescind, 8360 revised, and 8470 revised. Is there a motion? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Daryl. Discussion?
Yeah. I just have to find my notes, which I seem to have moved some of them around and I don't know where they went. I did not get to this part of the agenda until today, unfortunately, but my notes from our last policy meeting don't really quite align with what was brought to the board on this one. So I'll just run through them real quickly. On 5661, which was the wellness policy, what I understood that we had agreed on at policy was that we would see in first reading the changes that were required by law, not all of the other changes, and that policy was going to go back to the wellness committee with a chart that Sarah had put together that identified administrative requirements on an annual basis to see if they could trim that list down. So I don't think we were supposed to see in first reading the version of 5661 that is before everybody, because this is the one that's got all, if I understand right, this is the one that has all of the changes, not just the legally required changes. So that was on 5661. On 7280, there was a paragraph 3 in the original version that we saw that was going to be moved to the top, and paragraph 2 ended up getting moved up to the top. So I'm not quite sure what happened with that one. And 8360 was a non-revision other than the implementation part of that one, and the second sentence of that was taken out, and I don't have any recollection of having discussed that change at policy. And then the last one was 7221, and I don't know if there was an update to it. We had talked, Dr. Tice, maybe you had more on this. This was the graduation policy, 7221, and we talked about making a change to that was going to be run past Dr. Kilmer before it came up for first reading, which was to better align the new language in 7221 with the code of conduct, where it was going to say in that new line that's added on that was prohibited from the privilege of participating in graduation, because privilege was the term that tied it to the code of conduct. So I don't know if that got run past Dr. Kilmer and he asked to have that taken back out, or if it didn't get run past him, but it doesn't contain the change that we had talked about putting in there.
Okay, we can double check on that. This language here is what Dr. Kilmer had originally proposed, but you're right, we did say about privilege of participating.
To verify everything that Dan said is, I also have that in my notes.
So I don't want to kibosh this first reading, but there's
sure.
I was going to say there's a policy committee meeting tomorrow.
Yeah.
So since there was a lot of different little things there that were brought to our attention, why don't we, that was 5661. And what were the other numbers, Dan? The other?
7280, 8360,
Mhm.
and 7221.
Okay,
Three
so
of
one,
them, 7230, 7251, and 8470 are all as we had agreed to move them forward. Those
okay,
were erased.
so the ones that had the concerns were 7221, 5661, 7280, and 8360.
Yes.
Okay, so can we then, why don't we amend the motion to remove those 4 from the motion to move those into second reading, and have the policy committee go back over those again tomorrow to see, to fix the concerns or look at that. So is there a motion then to move the policies forward absent 5661, 7280, 8360, and 7221?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second from Kelly. Any further discussion of those policies?
Yeah, Marissa, I just had something on 8360, the
Okay.
religious expression. And I don't know if this is more part of the policy or an administrative reg, or, you know, I guess my overall concern would be that we make sure, if we are going to be talking about cultural and religious traditions, that, you know, I don't know, is there a way that we can talk about diversifying what cultural and religious traditions we talk about? Because, you know, I certainly only have one experience with 2 kids and, you know, I guess now 3 buildings, but, you know, just at the elementary level, I know, you know, there tends to be certain times of the year focus on a couple of traditions, and sometimes within those traditions, it seems that the diversification is just around different rituals within those couple of traditions. But there are certainly other religious traditions other than the ones that, you know, that have holidays in December. So I don't know if that's, you know, if that's something the board would think is maybe missing from here, or something that, you know, maybe it's just something I want to express, you know, to you, Craig, and but just making sure that, you know, not only are we delivering it in an instructional way and not promoting religion, but that we're, you know, also, if we're going to be talking about religion, that we truly are diversifying, talking about the various traditions that might have holidays, you know, other times of the year.
A good point. And we had our group of students who came to us earlier this year to talk just about that, about how they would like to see more representation of their culture so that their peers and staff members understood their religion. So I don't know if that's a policy or a not necessarily a policy, but something just we would like to see, a cultural thing, a change we would like to see in how we approach this issue. So just being aware of more diversity in our schools and how we can support that. And I think that's something well, I know that's something we're going to be talking about this summer, how we can make sure that all students have a sense of belonging. And I think part of feeling like you belong is feeling like people are interested and have the opportunity to learn about different cultures, including ones that may not be as widely represented in our district. So maybe that's a conversation we have as we're looking at those global issues, how we can be more sensitive to diversity in our district.
Yeah, no, I'd be okay with that. Go ahead, Craig.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can take this back to policy again tomorrow to take a look at it again. Again, the devil's in the details. I mean, I do think the less is more as we go forward, and then to tie up more into the regulation. But you're right. I mean, the more we go into down certain paths, you're right. You want to make sure that you've accounted for every religion, just to make sure that no one is slighted. So we can take another look at it.
I don't know if it's so much making sure we've accounted for every religion, because I don't know if you can do that. I think it's more of just that we're not always looking at the same ones, that we're just, you know, and it's a culture where people feel comfortable saying, you know, what about, or can we can we look at this particular religion, or maybe we want to, you know, talk about what we're reading, what books our students are reading as part of the curriculum. And so not necessarily that we're trying to check off that we're covering everyone, because we're going to miss one if we're doing that, but just more of a bigger picture that we're promoting that diversity and including that in how we approach working with our students.
So I just want to say on this 8360, this is a perfect example of the discussion we were having a little bit before. So just to be clear on what's attached, there's the policy and there's the administrative reg. We're not being asked to approve the administrative reg. We don't do that. But the reg is what's before you as the proposed reg is what was given to us by Erie 1 as their proposed new policy. And the actual policy is identical to what we already have in place at FM, other than one sentence that was taken out of the implementation section. So this was a situation where we looked at the whole thing and said, as Dr. Tice just said, devil's in the details, and depending on how far down that rabbit hole you want to go is where you can encounter different traps. And so what we decided was to stick with the less is more, keep it general, and then leave the details to the administrative reg side of this, where it'll be more flexible moving forward. But there were 2 or 3 where you were shown the administrative reg. Just to be clear on this resolution on first reading, nobody's being asked to approve the administrative reg part, just the policy part.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. I think it's something that just struck me. So not anything I think we'd have ever talked about as a board or with Craig. So.
Kelly, I agree. I'd like to see that as part of the board's discussions this summer into the fall. And I mean, it does have the language of nurturing the development of knowledge and respect for the rights of all cultural and religious groups as a continuing goal at the district. So I think there is some language in there to speak to that. But I think you're kind of speaking more to the implementation, and to that, I think those are some good discussions we can start.
Versus muted.
There we go. So I said we had a first and a second. Now we're voting. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you. Good discussion there. All right, next on the agenda, item 3.08, policy cycle review 3000 series. Is there a motion that the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby acknowledge the review of the 3000 series policies completed by the policy committee, and hereby move the following policies into second reading at the next board meeting? 3111 revised, 3140 revised, 3150 revised, 3290 revised, 3310 revised, and 3430 rescinded. Is there a motion to do so? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Kelly. Discussion?
So I just want to clarify, because we've done this a couple different ways recently as part of the policy review cycle, and it's really just what everybody's preference is going forward. When we completed the 3000 series review, there obviously were many 3000 series policies where there was no change recommended, and we agreed not to have a change made. So the question is, going forward in sticking to that review cycle, is whether we should be, whether it's the board's preference that we specifically identify in this the policies on which there was agreement to make no change, or if everybody's just fine with understanding 3000 series was completed and the only ones that are called out are the ones that some change or rescission was recommended in.
Yeah, Dan, I mean, for me personally, I think the way you put that, your choice B. So, you know, we went through the series and these are the ones that we thought might have revisions. I think that would, you know, be sufficient for me to realize that I should, if I want to, you know, I should be reviewing just to refamiliarize myself with all of 3000 in this case.
Okay. Anybody else have any burning opinion or desire to see that one way or the other? Okay, Sarah, I guess that's how we're going to do it moving forward.
Yeah, I think the only, you know, I know it's more reading, but the only benefit I think, and I don't necessarily am convinced, it may not necessarily be a benefit, is by looking at those policies that were reviewed and had no recommended changes, it just allows a board member to put their eyes on it so that it helps them to become more familiar, because there are so many policies and it's not part of our evening reading material, that's all. But I'm good either way, whatever the board wishes is fine.
So we had a first and a second. We've had discussion. All those in favor, please state aye, raising your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, item 3.09. Is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the following reserve resolutions? Do I need to read each one or just the general? I do, yes. Okay. To set the limit for the reserve tax cert, an amount not to exceed $2,500,000 due to no change in tax cert liabilities. An amount up to $451,673,000 shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To set the limit for the reserve employee retirement contributions at an amount not to exceed $1,929,000. An amount of up to $251,965 shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To establish the limit for the reserve for teachers' retirement contributions at an amount not to exceed $678,779. An amount of up to $678,779 shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To set the limit for the employee benefit accrued liability reserve fund at an amount not to exceed $2,618,000. An amount of up to $238,507 shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To set the limit for the reserve for workers' compensation in an amount not to exceed $1,800,000, an amount of up to $317,325 shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To set the limit for the reserve for unemployment at an amount not to exceed $350,000, an amount of up to $138,673 shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To set the limit for the 2017 Capital Reserve Fund at an amount not to exceed $10 million, an amount of up to $5,359,537 shall be funded from excess general fund monies and shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To set the limit for the reserve for debt service at an amount not to exceed $160,000. An amount of up to $8,137 shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. To establish the limit for the liability reserve fund at an amount not to exceed $2,600,000. An amount of up to $2,600,000 shall be funded from excess general fund monies and shall be transferred from the unexpended and unencumbered fund balance of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. Is there a motion to do so? Thank you, Mark. Second from Daryl. Got to be some discussion after that long.
Well done, Marissa.
Oh, there we go.
I just want to clarify a little bit in my mind, just the words shall carry very specific intent in this. And we had a long discussion about this in Finance Committee. I understand audit also had some discussions on these reserve funds. And I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct, that all we are doing is approving the ceiling of each of these reserve funds. We're not actually being asked to approve, nor are we approving actual transfers to these funds at this time. Am I correct on that?
Yes, these are just ceiling amounts, as you mentioned. There is no way that we would have that much of a surplus to fully fund any of these, or fully fund all of them. You know, as we close the books in July and August, we'll have a clearer understanding of how much of the surplus we do have in the current year. And then we'll make a decision on exactly which funds we're going to increase, or what reserves we're going to increase and to what levels.
Thank you for clarifying that. And just, I guess, just moving forward, I had the benefit of having seen some backup material on this and having had the discussion that we had in finance. And so when things like this are brought forward, I think it would be beneficial to the whole board if the memos, like for example, the memo that we got in finance on this, if that was attached to the administrative content section of this, just so that people have a little bit of other backup information that helps explain why this is what it is, etc. I just think that would be beneficial to everybody to have access to those materials when it's specific to a resolution like this.
And we can do that in the future.
Any further discussion of the resolutions? Okay, we had a first and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, thank you. Next, item 3.11. Is there a motion that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby approve the Special Patrol Officer and School Information Resource Officer agreements as presented?
President Mims, can we do 3.10,
Did I miss one?
please?
I'm sorry, I missed that one. Thank you for pointing that out. Going back to 3.10, resolution for the Code of Conduct. Is there a motion to approve the 2020-21 Code of Conduct as presented? Thank you, Daryl. Second from Tim. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, item 3.11, is there a motion for the Board of Education to hereby approve the Special Patrol Officer and School Information Resource Officer agreements as presented? Thank you, Sherry. Second from Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Item 3.12, Health and Welfare Services Contract with Jamesville DeWitt Central School District. Oops. Is there a motion that the Board of Education authorize the Board President, District Clerk, and Superintendent to sign the contract for health and welfare services provided by the Jamesville DeWitt Central School District for the 2019-20 school year? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Daryl. Discussion. Dan?
Is this, I'm sorry, is this a retroactive? Is this, are the dates right that this is for this academic year, not the forthcoming academic year?
Correct. They always bill us in arrears for the services provided. So it would be an FM student that resides in our boundaries attending a private school in the Jamesville DeWitt Central School District, of which Jamesville DeWitt Central is required to provide the health services.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, item 3.13, King and King Architects Contract Amendum Capital Transfer. Is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the contract with King and King Architects for the capital transfer projects in the amount of $42,000? Thank you, Kelly. Second. Thank you, Daryl. Any discussion?
Bill, can you just help clarify what this is in relation to?
Yes, this is in relationship to the capital transfer project next year to take care of the paving at Pride Lane. Also the a little bit of security at the high school and the Enders Road carpet replacement.
So it's for the upcoming.
That is correct.
Okay, that's.
And it's dependent upon voter approval, of course.
That was my next question, is we're approving a contract for a project that we don't actually have voter approval yet for technically.
Well, hopefully not, if it weren't approved, we would be able to not, the contract would then be moot, right? Correct? Or
Yeah, we would need voter to execute, correct.
all right. So we had a first.
It's a pleasure of the board. You can wait until Friday if you would like.
Can we just amend it to say contingent on voter approval?
Of the capital project?
Not of the budget.
Of the budget. Okay. So is there a motion then to approve, excuse me, the amended motion to approve the contract with King and King Architects for the capital transfer projects in the amount of $42,000 pending voter approval
Of the budget.
of the budget?
Yes.
Thank you, Kelly. Second from Dan. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, next board guidelines. They're back. So Sherry and I have presented the board guidelines. We got feedback from board members. Originally, we were looking to have this be part of policy, but as we have thoroughly discussed this evening, we want shorter policies, not longer ones. And we also had board agreement that we did want to have some procedures in place as we move forward, so that we're all clear on expectations for how we will, for board process, that we're in agreement as this board as to how we will move forward. So instead of presenting this as changing 1,000, we've presented it as board operating procedures. So they would be attached to policy and not written into the policy. Sherry, did you want to add to that?
No, I think you said it very well. So the attached documents are what we worked on together with all the changes. And then I just formatted it to look like, a final black copy rather than all the red lines and stuff like that.
So we're looking for a motion this evening to approve the proposed board guidelines. So we're adopting those revised, or those NYSBA guidelines that have some slight revisions for our district. So is there a motion to approve the proposed board guidelines? Thank you, Sherry. Second from Daryl. Discussion.
Marissa, I have a question for point of clarity.
Yes.
So are you folks proposing that we use this as a reference guide that's attached to our existing policy?
Reference guide, I would call it, it's the proposed board guidelines. So it's how board procedures. You know, this is what the board will, this is how the board will conduct itself as far as these procedures. And these are our board procedures. So we're not writing into policy because we spent a lot of time on the issue of should it be in policy and what does that mean? And there were a lot of good points made about when you have these lengthy policies, there are all sorts of opportunities for gotchas and things that weren't checked off. And the big picture is that the board works better when there are a set of guidelines that we're all in agreement on. That's the big picture that we were trying to accomplish with having these. This is a goal. Last summer, I think we first talked about this, and the issue was, you know, there was a lot of difference in opinion as to how we're supposed to proceed on a lot of different issues. That's where this came from. We set a board goal to look at our board guidelines and that policy 1000. And so from that, we are now here after a lot of discussion this year about how we can accomplish that. We took into consideration that we do want to have shorter policies as a board. That's clear. The board does not want cumbersome policies, but the board does want a set of procedures, guidelines that we can reference as far as when different board issues come up. So this is a board procedural manual that this is how we will generally conduct our business, but we are not writing it into policy. If we do that, then I do agree. We will have instances where people will say, oh, you did not do all of these items. But instead, what we could have is good discussion about, you know, our board procedure says we're supposed to do this. And here's how we're supposed to handle the situation when it comes up. And we can be flexible with one another and have good discussion about when we might want to do something a little differently, or when we need to go and look and have some guidance as far as how we should handle certain situations. It's not going to cover everything, but.
Right, but because of what you just said is still my point that I keep going back to. We never used to have our guidelines in policy. That was a recent change. They were always an exhibit attached to our policy 1000. And I don't know exactly how that transformation occurred. And I think it was through the Erie 1 policy review where the exhibits that we had as our guidelines got put into policy. They never used to be there. So I think trying to use the points of whether it's better to be in guidelines or whether, is a operating procedure manual, as you call it, which can be interchangeable with the word guidelines as far as I'm concerned, until we are all clear on exactly what that means. So whether it's in that form or a policy form, it's still how we do business. One has no bearing on the other. And in terms of length, obviously this is far longer. I don't know that it matters if, as I said, if our policy 1000 were kept as an exhibit, it would be certainly far shorter than what's here. Yes, we have spent a lot of time on this, and multiple individuals have spent a lot of time. But the board hasn't spent a lot of time really discussing this, only presenting it and having us read it on our own. I know only a few people made changes to notes that they had, but I don't understand the system that you used or the process that you used to decide. The board didn't decide what got put into this based on the notes that were submitted and what didn't get put into this, because everything was not put into this. And that's the part that bothers me. So here we have a lengthy, detailed document that you would like the board to say, this is how we're going to do business. But yet as a board, we haven't done the work to discuss it amongst ourselves, but we've had our officers and superintendent discuss it and decide what's going to be put in there. So I do have a problem with that.
So just to go back over briefly. So we met in November, and I can't remember the month now, but the board did meet, you were there, and we discussed the board guidelines, and the consensus of the board was that we wanted to use the NYSBA guidelines. Since then, we've had numerous board meetings where there's been discussion about, is it policy, or how do we fit this into our current board policy? We did get feedback from you and from Dan about some changes to the board guidelines. So that is highlighted and shown to the board, and the board had opportunity to look at what you sent. So this is our proposed board guidelines for the district, and it wasn't just the 3 people having that discussion. The board has actually did meet and had a discussion about the NYSBA guidelines. What has been, I don't want to use the word debated, but what we've had some challenges with is figuring out how we want this to be structured into our board guidelines. I don't have a problem with it being an exhibit. I mean, whatever language you want to use to have the board guidelines, the NYSBA guidelines, I'm fine with it. Is it an exhibit? That's fine. If it's, just an attachment, I don't know how you want to do that. I'm fine with that. We did present it to the board. This is not the first time the board has seen the guidelines and had a chance to look them over. If we need additional time to look them over, if people would like some more time to look at this, I am fine with that. But we did need to present it to the board and have the board have that discussion. So if we would like to, if the board's will is to go back and look at these guidelines and have further discussion about any changes that the board would like to make to these, I am fine with that. If we want to have further discussion about, how it's situated into policy, whether as a exhibit or what have you, I'm fine with that. It's here for discussion. No one's saying we have to approve this tonight. It is a motion, needs a second and discussion, and then the board needs to vote on it. It's just been our intention to follow what the consensus of the board has been this year. And it started with, we need to look at our board guidelines and review them. The board met and did that, and we've discussed it at multiple meetings. And so this is the product that we're presenting to the board. Rebecca, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and Marissa, I do hear you on that. And we were supposed to originally go through each section. We didn't do that. We did that once. But I'm still not clear on the process that you used and what factors were played into the decision-making process of what board members' suggestions or their note, what their notes had said as a result of the meetings that we have had in the past. All those suggestions that were made were not included. Some were, some weren't. So for me, who made that decision? Because it wasn't the board that made that decision. And when you look at this, I know you've got it outlined in colors, but everything's not in there. So I just feel as if you're going to put some of the suggestions in and not others, there should be a rationale. So just as if when we used to do policy review, there was always a rationale. That rationale piece is missing now in policy review. I hope it comes back when we end up going back to the NYSBA policy serve. But there's just like a big gap here from a process standpoint, and it just doesn't feel right to me. I think if we're concerned about following something, I'll bring it up again. If there are many details in this document, if we can't follow the few items that we had in 1,000, I don't know how we can even begin to follow this and who will make whom accountable for whether anybody strays from this. I just feel if it's giving us a lot of work. I think Rebecca and it may be Kelly, I don't remember, when we first had our fall retreat on this, and there may have been other board members that thought it was a great idea. It was mentioned that this be used as a resource, like have us go through it and have us remove the items that really weren't pertinent to FM, make sure it fit with what we do in practice as a district, and then use it as a reference in conjunction with what we have. Because if someone is looking for a little more detail, they can refer to this document and they can have that detail. Whereas it doesn't bind us into ensuring that each individual board member, and I'm not just speaking about this board, I mean, we're doing this for all future boards. It will be very difficult when we're all gone and there's a future board sitting in our seats to go back and even understand what it was that we had. So rather than throwing it all away at once, using it, perhaps considering using it this way, and let's see how it goes. Let's see how, because we have board members here that now will have experience of both, with both. using it next year, maybe the year after, maybe only 1 year, seeing how it goes and seeing what feels right for FM.
Or let me make sure I understood what you just said. So are you suggesting that we use the board guidelines just sort of informally next year, just to see how it goes for our board to refer back to them when we as process?
No, I'm suggesting, as the suggestion was made by other board members in the fall when we first started discussing this, is the board guidelines that we currently have in place, leaving them where they are, using this manual, whatever we end up labeling it, as a reference, so that we could see what feels right. Where is it that we're going? What are we following? Are we holding people accountable? And then if it's working and we feel that we want to make a permanent change, then we can do it at that point.
So keeping it as a reference. So we're sort of test driving the NYSBA board guidelines next year.
Well, even if it's or it may end up being that it stays there as a reference with more detail.
Right. We'll see how it goes next year.
Right.
And
so
then, okay.
Maybe this is an exhibit to policy 1000.
Right. Okay.
And I don't, again, Rebecca, if you weren't the one that first mentioned it in the fall, I thought it was you, just as something to consider as we move through this. And I think it vaguely got referenced back a few times, but I just wanted to bring it back to the board, because I'm concerned with making such a big change so fast and all at once.
And that actually sounds like a really good idea, Elena. Tim?
Yeah, my 2 cents on it, for what it's worth, is that even if used in a trial run basis, whatever it may be, I hope you all have a final authority to get through the year. If you have competing outcomes based on different sources that you use. If you've got one thing on policy, if you got one thing in an attachment to the old policy, and if you've got this in the way of an example of how to get an item on the agenda, you need clarity as far as which is the decisive source of the rules. Otherwise, competing sets of rules are a messy thing that can take up a lot of your time here.
Sherry, I see your hand up. I think Rebecca, did you want to say something too? Because I'll go to you next.
I mean, I'm a little, me next or Sherry next?
Sherry, then you.
Okay. Elena, you were talking about the rationale for any changes in the documents, and because I was part of that team who did the changes, I just want to address in relation to what Tim just said. Any changes made had nothing, it had only had to do with our current practice and our current policy. So the changes were made to align with what's currently written. And any changes addressed the fact that there might be, like you said, how to add an agenda item, we made sure that they matched. So changes weren't made willy-nilly because somebody said they want this here, they want this there, we don't like what you said. It was, let's look up policy 1000, let's see what it says, let's make them all match. So as far as I know, all of this guideline draft that we're looking at matches anything in policy. I don't think anything else that is in there is more of like a regulation. It's like more words to help explain what policy 1000 asks us to do.
Well, I'm referring specifically to the comments that were submitted, or notes that were submitted to the officers and the board with regard to differences that we had and what we thought the outcome was of a discussion. Whether those are what you're referring to as changes in pink, I believe that's it. But some of those comments that were made were included, others were not.
I think that the pink was somebody submitted a comment and we looked back and we said, oh yes, this does cause a problem. It does conflict with something. So that's a good point. Let's change it.
But again, we didn't have a board discussion on whether or not we all felt that So, we work best when we can discuss as a whole, not when we work in isolation and have a smaller group of people making a decision. So I understand that everything is in its entirety is in this document, and whether it's a red line change or a pink line change or blue or green or black, yellow or purple or orange, I get that. But there's a benefit to working through it as a group. I mean, when we look at the title of this document, one would think that we would have done that. And having those discussions, I mean, that's where we do our best work, not just being given a document in a final draft form. Even though we've looked at this document in its revisions, there's never really been discourse. There's never really been a great dialogue. It's always been, okay, here it is, and nobody ever says anything.
Well, just to clarify and just add on what Sherry said, we didn't make changes that were just our personal preference. It was looking at, because a lot of what you and Dan pointed out were conflicts. So there was something that was in board guidelines that conflicted with our current board procedure or our board policy. So that's what was not included in here. I'm going to go to Rebecca now because she's been waiting for a while.
I mean, I'm not 100% remembering what I recommended in the fall, but I trust Elena that, I mean, this is sort of a never ending story on this process. And I'd love to just move forward. I would support Elena's sort of idea of incremental change. I also feel like, to the point of to your point, Sherry, that everything has already, that there's not really conflicts now between policy 1000 and these much more detailed procedures. I don't see it as problematic to have both, but I could see kind of trying it for a year and then deciding if we then want to sort of permanently replace. But I never really see a problem with having a short summary and then a more fulsome. These really are operating procedures, and it's 36 pages and it's super detailed. So I think they could both live together, and I could live with that. And I don't think we've had, I almost think it's too much material and we haven't had enough time to really talk about everything in detail. And I don't think we should spend a lot of the year, or whoever's on the board next year should, spend a lot of time next year. But I think we've done enough work to, I think, approve them and move forward with them as they are now. And so I actually I agree with Elena's approach for sort of doing this for next year. And it sounded like, Marissa, you did too.
Going back to what our original intent was, what I understand the board's goal is that we were in a place where we felt we needed some more work in this regards. We really needed something to refer to, because you have some organizational memory. You have organizational memory that goes from a year to like 25 years, and and in between, and not everybody has the same recollection of how things have been or should be. So the board was like, well, we need something that this board has ownership of. I think it's a great idea to try it out for a year. So we can amend this to say, we'll amend it to say we would adopt it for the year, or maybe not use the word adopt if that's too much, but agree as a board. If we can come to an agreement as a board that we will use the proposed guidelines over the next year and see how it goes. And then we can come back, and I wouldn't necessarily want to wait a whole year. I think we should talk about it mid-year to see how it's going for us. I think waiting a year to say something isn't working is way too long. So maybe we start off this July with these guidelines and then circle back to it November, December, and see how it's working for us, have some discussion about it then, and then at the end of the year, come back to it again and say, yeah, we like it, or no, we don't. I'm fine with doing that. Dan, I see your hand up over there.
So just a couple of things. One is, I'm happier with the approach that I'm hearing, and with this not replacing concise policies with this volume. The lawyer in me is concerned about what Tim referenced, which was my concern is we've got, policy 1000 that's labeled organizational guidelines, And now here's a document that's called operating procedures. And you're talking about it being attached as an exhibit. And I think that risks raising confusion at times over what are we actually following and what we should actually be following as a policy. And I view this more as a reference guide. And so I don't necessarily care so much what it's titled, although operating procedures jumped out at me. I just would want to see, to kind of put a bow on what I think I'm hearing from Rebecca and Elena, is a very simple footnote disclaimer on the first page of this that says, Policy 1000 is the governing document. This is a reference guide. If there's a conflict with Policy 1000, Policy 1000 governs. Not this, but this is just here as a best practice reference guide for things that may not be covered in detail in Policy 1000. Just so that there's no confusion by this or any other board moving forward of, am I following A or am I following B? I just want to see that clarity of what this is and what this is not.
And I think best practices is a good summary of what we tried to achieve here. We weren't trying to rewrite policy. We were trying to develop best practices customized for our district.
So I think if we can put that type of a disclaimer right on the cover of this is a best practices reference guide. It does not replace or stand in place of Policy 1000. Policy 1000 is the governing document. If we have that, and then let's move forward and use it and see how it works or doesn't work and go from there. I just want to have that clarity to what this is and what this is not.
So let me see if we got this. So we would use the NYSBA reference guide, and we're going to indicate that that is a best practices manual that the board will reference, but we will follow Board 1000 policy.
That policy,
So then,
Policy 1000 governs the district and governs the board's organization and process.
so then we don't, I think we don't, well, so we don't need to take the action that's proposed this evening then, because I see you're nodding your head over there, Sarah. Okay, so we don't need to take the action that the proposed action this evening. What we do need to do is agree that we will or have this as a reference manual for best practices. But Policy 1000 remains the policy of the board. I don't think we need to add that part to it as long as we just say we're adopting this as a reference manual for best practices.
My concern
if you want to put that disclaimer in there, that's fine.
When documents float out there and you look at it and it's hard to tell, we've had enough times of what did we agree or what did we not agree?
No problem. I'm good with that. So we could add that disclaimer in there on top of this, put it in the front of it, or in front when you open it up, it says it's a reference guide for best practice, but Policy 1000 is the governing policy for the board.
Yes.
Okay. So then we would be in agreement then that we would use that in that light. So, or in that manner, I'm sorry.
Now, back when we had that retreat, whenever it was in October or something, we were holding the NYSBA version of it. And some people said, I just like how convenient it is to have this, and it has a good vibe to it. Is this something we could, once we put this disclaimer in on the front cover, we could print for each board member for this coming year?
Absolutely, no problem.
Should we consider changing the title of this document so that if it's best practices, we have that and not operating procedures? Just a thought. I don't want to.
No.
Best practices for board operations.
There we go. So I think we should vote just to memorialize this decision that we're making. So we are agreeing to adopt the best practices for board operations with the disclaimer written into it that it is just for that, for a reference manual for the board, and that we will continue to be governed by 1,000. Is there a motion to do so? Thank you, Sherry. Second from Rebecca. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Thank you. You know, I know that's a lengthy and sometimes, you know, we often have different opinions, but I think as a board, we're getting much better at working through those things and coming to a good outcome. So thank you all for that. Oops, I have two mice. I'm trying to remember which mouse goes with which screen over here. All right, so board development, your board self-evaluation. I haven't done mine yet. We have to get those done. And then of course, soon we'll be looking at some retreat dates to meet with Dr. Tice, and of course a date to review that board self-evaluation. So I'm happy to pass that scheduling back over to you, Sarah. I don't like it very much. All right, so we'll do that. Working agenda items. Let's see what we got. Nothing under working agenda items, but I think from our discussion with Dr. Tice on Friday, we will have some items that we'll be adding to that after that discussion. Potential considerations for future meetings. Got district diversity. And Dr. Tice, are you ready to announce the I don't want to steal your thunder there. The book that the district's going to be reading this summer, is that a final deal? I'm not going to say it if it's not final.
Well,
okay, I don't want to like.
Yeah. Well,
it's not
give everybody a heads up in the Thursday letter.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So I'm hearing a lot of good feedback from the board about, you know, I get excited about things. Diversity, and I think we're really coming up with some good ideas. And the more we talk about it, I think we're going to come up with a lot of good ways to work on that issue in our district. And keep in mind, we do have Interfaith Council as a resource and plenty of other resources in the community as well that I'm sure we'll draw on. Contingency plans, that's something we're going to start talking about with Dr. Tice and hopefully get some guidance from the state so we can work on that in more detail. Future meeting agenda or calendars. I'm sorry, meetings calendar. I don't see anything there.
Can I jump in there?
Sure.
Considering we're going toward phase 4, do we have any guidelines on when we will go back to in-person meetings rather than Zoom meetings?
Good question.
Really good question.
What's the guidance right now on the number of people in a meeting, like group meetings?
25.
What's that?
It is
25
10 right now, but 25 on Friday. Correct, Dan?
Okay. And I do think some of these discussions that we're going to have, especially when we start getting to really sensitive issues, it is better in person. And we do have some big spaces that we can take advantage of in the district. So maybe since the guidance is going up to 25 on Friday, maybe we could talk about where we might be able to space ourselves out as far apart from each other as possible.
I will make FM green masks for everybody.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
Can I just ask a question while we're just sort of having that part of the discussion that I meant to ask Dr. Tice earlier in his superintendent's report? Is there any update, Craig, on district field and property use as things are being opened? A lot of people in the community have been asking of, you know, when can we go run around a soccer field? When can we use some of the fields for all the things they get used for? Is there any movement on that?
We've opened the tennis courts, but our legal counsel's opinion is that with schools closed for the summer, that we remain closed in terms of our facilities. I'm hopeful that as the governor's executive orders come out, and as you've heard recently, for sport team practices, which will eventually become athletic contests, that as that opens up, then we will be able to open up our fields accordingly. But right now, it's the opinion of legal counsel that we are still closed.
For what it's worth on that, and I'm sensitive to the opinion of legal counsel on that, the practical outcome is that children from our school districts are going over to use the turf at ESM, thereby causing a greater concentration people and bodies on less turf. So I get it that that's opinion of legal counsel, but I don't know that the intended consequence is what is hoped for.
They're also going to JD because JD's turf is open as well.
Yeah.
And it's causing a lot of confusion that other districts' turfs and fields are open, that some of the sports teams are allowed to practice now. Most of them are if it's 10 or less. Some of them are even if it's more than 10. That I understand why we closed them with what was happening at the height of this when we had 60 kids playing basketball over at Enders Road, and it kind of a few ruined it for a lot. But it really seems to me like we're at a point where yes, the buildings are closed, but the fields can be used responsibly, and I would really hope that we could give some serious consideration to opening them. I'm struggling to understand the legal rationale when many other schools have their fields open.
Have we had a recent discussion about that, Craig? I mean, keeping them with the new
Oh,
guidance.
the chief school officers discussed it last week even. So there are some districts that are not policing the availability of their fields. I would hesitate to say they're open. They're just not enforcing that they're closed. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but they just don't have the ability. There's not fencing around it and so forth, depending on the particular district. But again, under the advice of legal counsel, I'm hoping, like I said, with playgrounds supposedly opening up in the county and getting some more guidance on the practices. Right now, it's supposed to be small practices, 10 and under, no games. It's evolving. It's changing daily, as you know. So I'm hoping, because I know that there's a lot of people chomping at the bit to be able to use the playgrounds and the fields.
And I believe the same legal firm represents both ESM and FM, although separately.
I just, big picture, I get concerned that, our students suffered immeasurably this spring in a lot of ways. And it's just one more way that they're not able to do things that legally they're allowed to do, but they just don't have a place to do it because they would rely on the school fields to be able to do it. And I'd like to find a way that our kids don't keep getting hammered and I don't want to use the word punished, but they're really restricted when they need to be out. They need to be doing things, and it's really hurting them.
Well, I totally agree, but again, when a governor says that localities cannot be complicit and must enforce the social distancing, that puts us in a precarious position. We had a number of phone calls regarding a school-sponsored event in terms of a senior night, as I think the board is aware of in the backup information. And the qualifier was it was being supervised by school personnel to ensure their social distancing. So I totally agree. Everybody's chomping at the bit, but to unlock the fields, I think the reason legal counsel is saying no is, you're ahead of me, is are we going to be supervising the facilities to ensure that social distancing? So that's the question before us, is in for a penny, in for a pound. Once we open it up, are we going to be supervising to ensure that the populace, the citizenry is being, following social distancing?
Do we have the capacity to do that, or would that require resources that is not practical?
Yeah, well, I mean, for a senior night, we had the athletic director there. I mean, to start assigning supervisors for playgrounds and fields, I think would be cost prohibitive.
So as far as the county right now, the county still has playgrounds closed? Is that correct?
The understanding is, yeah, with the potential of by Friday, possibly the playground's opening up.
Can we at least reach out to county executive. I know it's a county executive and the governor's executive orders too, but just to let him know, I mean, he's provided a little bit of guidance, I think, as far as like graduation. Well, a little bit, but perhaps we could reach out and you know, that we as a board would like to open our turf field so that our community can utilize that, and just to show support, and that we feel that that's something that we should do right now, just to reach out to him. Maybe that might have some influence on his upcoming decision. So I do understand we have to follow the county executive's orders and the governor's orders, but and that we should advocate that we would like to have those open.
Certainly, we can do that.
I mean, if the board is in agreement that we could do that. Does everyone think that would be okay?
Well, I think I err on the side of being cautious, but that's just me. So I'm happy to wait another week to see what happens. You know, having 25 people be able to gather, and I'd feel more comfortable then considering opening up fields. But
And what I would say, to follow up on my earlier comment, is, Craig, I appreciate the explanation. It had appeared that other school districts were allowed to open and therefore were doing so. But I appreciate the clarification of, oh no, they're not. They're just not policing it. So truly there is a school district liability issue if we do open earlier. And that was a component of it I didn't recognize or realize. So I get it better now. So I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you. Yeah, there seemed to be unanimity throughout all the school districts, understanding the, excuse me, the external pressures that every community is facing, because people just cabin fever, pandemic fever, just want to get out and have a little fresh air. So I think we're all in agreement that the sooner we can make that happen, the better. It's just our legal counsel is being conservative to make sure that we're not complicit in violating any executive orders.
So where are we leaving this with that? We will reach out, or?
I will check that. Yeah, absolutely. When the county executive said that the tennis courts could be open, we open the tennis courts. If he says the playgrounds can open Friday, we will open the playgrounds. So we can reach out just to see where they are with that.
So if he said playgrounds, that wouldn't include the turf field then, correct? That wouldn't include the fields, or is that a separate? How does that work? Was that included in the order?
Yes or no? I mean, yes or no? Right now, practices are supposed to be limited to 10 or less. Everybody's socially distant, no athletic contests, but we know that's going to evolve. So the minute those evolve into games and practices larger than 10 or more, I think we open the fields. Technically, schools are still going to be closed. As we heard from the governor, day camps can be run, but out of all due respect to our local towns and villages that run the day camps, you know, the buildings are still closed. So in the event of inclement weather, they would have to have shelters. In terms of restroom facilities, they would have to bring in porta potties. The buildings are by executive order closed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So I believe I am on 5.02, dates to remember. Yes.
May I ask a question? Is it the board's wish that proposals be provided for the next regular board meeting on July 13th regarding an in-person board meeting, subject to the 10-person limit being raised? Board wish to meet in person on that day?
I'm hearing that some interest in the board in having an in-person meeting, just trying to figure out how to best do that. Keeping, you know, socially distanced, you can do that, you know, how we can do that with the most social distance between all of us.
I mean, I think at the very least, we want to have a big room with open windows, or an outdoor meeting under the lights on the turf. But
Can you imagine if we did that? No.
These are long meetings, so I think just public health guidelines, you're not really you would need some good distance.
Definitely not over at the conference center. And I don't know if those LGIs, I can't recall if they actually have windows in them. The big one at the high school, is there a window in that room?
Not,
Science.
no.
No.
Science.
Would just,
Science.
Cafeterias? Do they have windows?
That's a
The high
good
school
one.
does.
Yeah.
I'd just add that there's a distinction between whether you may have an in-person meeting and whether you must. I mean, you must go back to in-person when the open meetings law does not allow this anymore. And I don't know that there's yet a deadline for the expiration of that particular executive order. I don't know. I don't know where that is.
Good point. So maybe we come up with a couple different options for the board and we'll see what the board would like to do. So we'll come up with some in-person options. And of course we have our Zoom meeting set up.
Yeah.
And
if
then
I
we'll
remember
see,
correctly, the reorg is usually a relatively short meeting. Am I correct?
this is 2020. It could go for hours. We'll
Also,
see.
No, I think they're long. That one's a long meeting.
remember, there's also oaths to be administered at that, and I don't remember how those are being dealt with in a virtual setting.
I've actually just made that inquiry to legal counsel today, so I'm waiting for word on that.
Sarah on that.
All right, so we will come up with some options and we will present them to the board and we will see what we are able to do legally and what we would just want to do as a board for our next meeting. All right, thank you all very much. Oops, dates to remember. So the NISBA convention in October this year, as a board, we've agreed, or we've that we were not going to be going to conferences this year. We're limiting the conferences that our staff is going to go to, so we're going to be supportive and do that ourselves. But if anyone wanted to go on their own, there is the information for you. I think there are pretty good odds that convention is not going to take place this year, but we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Consent agenda. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Tim. All those in favor, please state aye, raising your hand. Anyone opposing or abstaining? All right, so then we had a few items pulled out of consent. So the first one was a former 6.04, now 7.01, the resolution for the Fayetteville Free Library and Manlius Library agreements. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Thank you, Sherry. Second from Kelly. Discussion.
So my question on this was again similar to a discussion we had earlier. This is contingent on voter approval that hasn't been tallied yet. So is it premature? Is this something that we should be dealing with on Friday instead?
Yeah, it can be just like the other one, contingent as you did, or postponed till Friday.
Well, and one thing to remember is that the library votes are separate propositions. They're separate from our budget approval.
Right.
So it's not really contingent upon our budget passing. It's contingent upon their propositions passing.
So could we amend it to approve the resolution contingent upon the Fayetteville Free Library and Manlius Library budgets passing then?
My concern is we're making assumptions. I assume they'll both pass, but you could also have a scenario where one passes and the other doesn't. So
Okay.
To me, I think it's an easier thing to punt till Friday and know what the outcome is and pass it in conjunction with the outcome.
I'm fine with that. Is the rest of the board okay with moving that to Friday's agenda? I see heads nodding. Okay, so do I need to rescind that motion, or whoever made it? Do they need to rescind it? Who made the motion? Kelly or
Sherry and Kelly.
So Sherry, will you rescind your motion then?
I rescind my motion.
Thank you so much. Okay. All right. The next was 7.02, which is the resolution for the Shapiro. That's how you pronounce it, Shapiro farm lease. Is there a motion to approve that? Farm lease, Shapiro. Thank you, Kelly. Second from Tim, discussion?
So I had two questions on these when I looked at it, because I knew we voted it on it last year and also the year before. And when I look back at it, the leases that we approve each year on this are the same. And paragraph 2 of the one we approved last year and also the year before say that they renew automatically for up to 5 one-year terms. So I don't know why we're approving a new lease when the one that we've approved in the past has renewed automatically. Was question 1. And then question 2 is, in light of all the discussions that we've had at Finance Committee and about budget and everything else, is particularly on the Broadfield property, is, you know, we keep leasing this out as farmland each year, and I think some decisions have been made in the past about not building on the Broadfield property, that if we're faced with a situation of a significant budgetary cut by the state, where we're looking at the possibility of cutting educational programming, then I would hope that we would preserve the freedom under any lease agreement to be able to at least have that property appraised and considered for sale if that generated revenues that would avoid programmatic cuts. So I'm just a little bit concerned about the flexibility that we have, especially on the Broadfield lease, about that. But I also don't, like I said, I don't know why we're redoing a lease that was automatically approved by its terms anyway. It just doesn't make sense to me from a legal perspective.
Yeah, we can table these and go back to legal counsel.
Okay, so there were 2 points there. One is why we're approving the renewal of the lease, approving the lease when it automatically renews, and then the other one was the potential sale for the property. Have we had that property appraised recently?
I do not know.
Okay. All right, so that's...
I just think if we're going to be looking, if we're going to get forced into a corner where we're searching for revenue to keep programs from being cut, I think we need to keep all of our options available. And if it's land we're not using and not going to use, I know why it was purchased originally, but I would like to see the flexibility on that maintained this year if we can, just in case we need it.
So if the lease does automatically renew every year, though, do we have the flexibility since the lease automatically renewed?
Well, it says that
we have the
terminate it, and it says we can terminate it in writing by August 1st of each year.
Okay, so we have to make a decision then before August 1st. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, to allow the tenant to salvage the crop.
Right.
So who made that motion on that one? I'm sorry, I don't recall. Thank you, Kelly. Will you rescind your motion then, please?
I rescind my motion.
Thank you, Kelly. Is it the same on 6.10, Dan?
Yes.
Okay, so we've removed that one from consent.
The only difference with 610 is it's far less acreage, and if I understand correctly, is that it, I think, is adjacent to the Pride Lane fields. So I think if I'm right, that's not one that we would probably ever entertain selling. The renewal issue on 6.10 is the same, but it's the Broadfield one that I'm concerned about maintaining the ability to liquidate if we needed to.
So for 6.10, are you fine with approving that one, or do you still want guidance as to why we have to renew it?
That's the same question. The renewal question is the same for both.
Fun fact,
all right.
Fun fact about the Broadfield site, for what it's worth, is back when the school district last thought about building on there, they did a cultural archaeological study and determined that it was indeed the site of Haudenosaunee village back in the 1500s. And so for any construction, whether for private housing or school, would be subject to all those issues arising out of that.
Yeah.
That's the small,
Okay.
that's correct, Tim. And that's the smaller portion of the entire property, so very good point.
We will
Okay,
look
so-
into that for you.
So 6.10 was pulled out of consent, so we didn't need a motion to table 6.10 until the next board meeting.
And
Thank you.
6.09?
Yes. Oh,
Okay, table 6.09 and 6.10 and
actually, 6.10 is the Broadfield one.
so we're tabling both of them.
Tabling both, yes.
Right. So a motion to table 6.09 and 6.10. Is there a motion to do so? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Dan. Any further discussion?
I thought
All
the
those in
property was on North Eagle Village Road. And I thought I heard you say that 6.10 was Broadfield.
6.10 is the O'Mara one, and it says in the lease at least that it's the Broadfield site.
Oh, the agenda I printed has it reversed.
Right, mine too.
So I just want to make sure we're notating it properly.
Yeah,
So we-
the agenda is reversed from the attachments, I think.
Okay, right. When you print the abbreviated agenda, it is flipped. 6.09 is the O'Mara and 10 is Shapiro. But our agenda is the opposite. So gotcha. All right.
Okay.
Interesting how that worked that way. Okay.
Okay, so there was a motion to table 6.09 and 6.10. Who made, I'm sorry, we had a motion from Rebecca, I believe, and Dan?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right. We have for executive session. So is there a motion to adjourn? Tim? Tim? Oh, Tim.
Can't second it.
Tim and second from Daryl. Any discussion?
We'll miss you, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm gonna miss you so much.
We can give you a hug in person when it's appropriate.
I look forward to it.
Well, you'll be here Friday, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We still have some more Tim time.
Like 10 more committee meetings, yeah.
Rescind that.
It's not over.
Very slow.
We're gonna drag this out till midnight.
Josh
They're on the
had a
30th.
very slow process.
Yes. All right. So we had a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. Indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right. Thank you guys for a good meeting. Have a good evening.